What if the world beneath our feet wasn't just a product of nature's slow hand, but a design carefully seeded by minds far beyond our comprehension? Tonight, we invite you into a journey that crosses time and questions reality. Imagine a civilization older than our oldest bones, one that shaped continents, etched wisdom into stone, and moved oceans with machines we have yet to rediscover. What if these ancient architects didn't vanish, but encoded their knowledge into the very landscape we walk today? From the symmetrical placement of megaliths to the harmonic resonance of forgotten temples, from buried geometries under deserts to inexplicable alignments with distant stars, patterns emerge. Not chaos, not coincidence, but intelligence. We don't ask you to believe, only to wonder, because sleep is the doorway to the deepest questions, and tonight we walk through it together. So find your stillness. Let your thoughts drift with us through shadowed ruins, over dusted timelines, and into the quiet heartbeat of a world that may not have been born, but built. Before we begin, we'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Tell us in the comments below. When you're ready, close your eyes. Let's begin the story. At the edge of the Anatolian plateau, beneath layers of sand and time, something stirs in the silence. Not a city, not a tomb, but a circle of stone, so old that it redefines what we thought we knew about civilization. This is Göbekli Tepe, set atop a barren ridge with sweeping views of the surrounding landscape. It remained hidden for over 10,000 years. Discovered in the 1990s, its megalithic pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, stood in circular enclosures, precisely arranged. Carved into them were images of foxes, snakes, boars, and birds. But these were not decorations. They were symbols, messages, echoes. At first light, the stones catch the soft gold of the rising sun. Their positioning isn't random. Many align with constellations that marked solstices and celestial transitions, long before writing was ever etched. In their silence, they whisper, "We understood the sky." The mystery deepens not just in what was built, but in what was buried. The site was intentionally entombed with debris and earth around 8000 BCE, as if preserving something sacred or hiding something dangerous. Instead of small tribes carving out survival, here we find monumental architecture requiring planning, cooperation, and vision. There are no signs of permanent dwellings nearby, suggesting this was not a place of living, but of gathering. Perhaps ritual, perhaps remembrance, perhaps something more. Let's trace the hands that lifted these stones, not as workers, but as engineers, who understood astronomy, who encoded meaning into alignment, who buried the past to preserve the future. In the winds of Göbekli Tepe, we begin to feel it, the outline of a society lost, not because it vanished, but because we forgot how to look. In the open fields of Salisbury, England, the wind moves low across the grass. Rising from the soil in solemn formation, Stonehenge casts long shadows on the land. Its stones are worn, scarred by centuries, but their positions remain, deliberate, defiant, timeless. Thousands of miles to the south, in Egypt's vast desert, another circle emerges, Nabata Playa. Here, a ring of smaller stones points not to the sun, but to Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky. And further west, in Brittany, France, rows of standing stones, Karnak's megaliths, stretch for miles, aligned with uncanny precision. Different regions, different eras, but the same obsession with the heavens. By twilight, each monument begins to speak in its own way. The sun casts lines across lintels, aligning with solstices. Shadows fall precisely where they were meant to. Beneath the soil, researchers find pits filled with burnt offerings, animal bones, and star shaped carvings. These weren't random attempts at worship, they were equations in stone. Geometry emerges from their placement: Pythagorean triangles, golden ratios, celestial grids. How could civilizations, supposedly isolated and primitive, share such similar design principles? Who passed the knowledge? And why encode it in monoliths that would outlast their builders? The idea of coincidence begins to crumble. Instead of isolated sparks of culture, we begin to see echoes, reflections of a deeper current that once moved through humanity, a current that understood not only where we stood on Earth, but how Earth moved among the stars. Perhaps they weren't building to honor the sky. Perhaps they were building to remember a time when someone else taught them how. Let's walk between the stones, not as tourists, but as seekers of forgotten language, a language written in granite and sunlight. And if we listen carefully enough, we may just hear it whisper back. The canopy breathes in slow rhythms. Beneath its emerald layers, the city of Copan lies in patient ruin. Vines curl around glyph-covered stelae. Roots burst through fractured temples. But the jungle, for all its chaos, hasn't erased what the Maya wrote in stone. One glyph repeats across cities: Palenque, Tikal, Chichen Itza. It speaks of time not in years, but in great cycles: Baktuns, Katuns, epochs that rise and fall like tides. At the heart of it is the long count, an ancient calendar that doesn't merely track the sun or the moon, but measures a span of over 5,000 years. It began in 3114 BCE and pointed to a reset in 2012. Not an end, but a transition. Why would a society in the jungle care about the galactic center? Why did they track Venus with such obsession, marking its rise and fall with temples built in its honor? Their architecture mirrors the sky. Observatories shaped to catch light on solstices. Temple stairways reflecting planetary orbits. Some pyramids echo the shadow of serpents at equinox. These weren't isolated myths. They were systems, calculations embodied in limestone. We see celestial mechanics hidden in sculptures, the precession of the equinoxes woven into myths, alignments to stars that won't return for thousands of years. And always the message: time is not linear. It turns. Some scholars argue they did this alone, that trial, error, and patience gave them this mastery. But the question lingers: how did they start so far ahead? From where came the idea that the cosmos had structure, rhythm, and memory? What if the Maya weren't the architects, but the archivists? Perhaps these calendars were not only tools, but gifts. Fragments of a more ancient map, passed hand to hand across centuries, encoded into stone to survive the forest and the forgetting. And tonight, beneath the jungle's hush, we trace that legacy in silence. The sea breathes in slow, tidal sighs. On the edge of Pohnpei, nestled among mangrove channels, the ruins of Nan Madol rise like forgotten ribs of a stone leviathan. Slabs of basalt, some weighing over 50 tons, rest upon one another in right angles, creating a maze of artificial islets and canals. No wheels, no pulleys, no draft animals, only stone, coral, tide, and time. We drift between these ruins as the water laps at our canoe. The silence is profound, broken only by birdsong and wind. The city feels less like a fortress and more like a dream, half submerged, half remembered. The basalt came from miles away. Dragged or floated, it was transported over hills and sea. But the logistics defy the tools we assume existed here. Some oral traditions speak of levitation, of stones singing across the ocean. Others point to knowledge lost in waves. Nan Madol's layout isn't random. It mirrors star patterns and ocean currents. Its placement atop coral reef suggests an understanding of ecology far ahead of its time. Channels divide ceremonial from domestic, sacred from mundane. This was not a settlement, it was a system. We trace a corridor where priests once passed. Walls rise beside us, black and wet with salt. The silence feels curated, like a soundproof vault built for memory. Could this have been a library of stone? In myths, Nan Madol was built by twin sorcerers. In stone, it suggests engineers. And here lies a possibility. What if they were both? Across Polynesia, we find similar alignments. Temples facing solstices, carvings that chart constellations, chants that encode directions across the sea. Perhaps they inherited something older, seafaring not born from invention, but restoration. Nan Madol may not be Atlantis, but it might be its ripple. Out here, the stars still guide, and sometimes we don't discover history, we remember it. Mist clings to the treetops as dawn spills gold over the Cambodian horizon. In the hush before sunrise, the towers of Angkor Wat mirror themselves in the moat, a reflection so perfect it feels deliberate. The still water becomes a lens, a portal to something older than the jungle it hides within. We step softly along the sandstone paths, each block carved, aligned, and placed with impossible precision. Rising ahead, the temple's 5 towers form a lotus, an image both spiritual and structural. But beneath this religious elegance lies a deeper geometry, one not just built for devotion, but for orientation. Angkor Wat faces west, not a common choice for a temple. Yet during equinox, the sun sets directly behind its central spire. At the summer solstice, shadows fall in symmetrical arcs. These aren't accidents, they're alignments, astronomical instruments cast in stone. Carvings along the galleries tell stories, yes, but also mark lunar phases and planetary cycles. One corridor, if walked slowly, mimics the orbit of Venus across the years. It's as though movement through space was once movement through understanding. Below the surface, hidden beneath centuries of soil, we find another marvel, a vast hydraulic grid, canals, reservoirs, and moats engineered to manage seasonal floods. Satellite scans reveal that Angkor's layout was more than urban. It was ecological, a water-based computer, perhaps, balancing pressure and flow to preserve the land. But the technology speaks quietly. No iron, no gears, only earth, slope, and timing. Could this design have roots in older knowledge? Some theories propose that the builders inherited sacred blueprints passed down from a vanished age, where the stars were not worshipped, but measured. And maybe Angkor wasn't just a temple. Maybe it was a remembrance, a memory carved into stone so the sky would not be forgotten. Here, the sacred and the scientific were never separate. They were the same. The stones are quiet. They do not shout their age or purpose, yet their placement resists forgetfulness. Along the southern coast of Malta, Hagar Kim sits like a rib cage of giants, its broad limestone blocks warmed by sun and salt wind. Some weigh over 20 tons. None are accidental. We stand before a trilithon entrance, where the rising sun once passed through a stone-framed aperture on the summer solstice. The alignment is precise, not a general nod to the east, but a deliberate call to the light. On that day, each year, golden rays pierce directly through the main corridor and bathe the inner chamber in fire. Inside, the stones arc into organic curves. Unlike the harsh corners of later architecture, they breathe. Their shapes recall the inner chambers of the earth or the womb of a forgotten goddess. Carvings depict spirals, dots, and hollowed recesses, patterns that echo stars, seeds, and cycles. Dating the temple defies expectation. Archaeologists estimate construction began around 3600 BCE. But some evidence, stratified soil, eroded doorways, and astronomical drift, hints at earlier phases, perhaps thousands of years older. Even more enigmatic is the temple's relationship with sound. Within certain chambers, whispers amplify unnaturally. Tones resonate like chimes inside stone lungs. Some frequencies create standing waves, hinting at acoustic design far beyond simple shelter. We follow the worn path outside and pause atop the ridge. From here, we see the sea, the curve of sky, and the distant island of Gozo. Another temple lies there, Gantija, aligned not with the sun, but with Sirius, the brightest star in the night. What culture carved stone to greet a star? There are no texts, no records, no empire, only massive stones with soft voices, aligned with the sky and the soul. Perhaps that's all they ever needed to leave behind. The sea here is not gentle. Its surface is restless, agitated by tides that shift like memory. Yet below, something waits. In the murky depths of the Gulf of Khambhat, sonar pulses trace what appear to be long straight lines, grids and walls, platforms, and right-angled corridors buried beneath centuries of silt. This is not a reef or a random scattering of stones. The shapes are too clean, too ordered. The structure spans several square kilometers, too large to dismiss as coincidence. At first, the discovery met silence. Later, disbelief. But samples retrieved from the seabed, tools, pottery fragments, human remains, have been carbon dated to over 9,000 years old. India's ancient epics, passed down as stories rather than data, describe a city called Dwarka, a kingdom built by a divine architect, Krishna, a city that shone with palaces of gold and streets paved with gemstones. And yet, it was doomed, swallowed by the sea after its purpose was fulfilled. Is this where legend and sediment meet? We picture the shoreline retreating, temples submerged step by step. Stone steps vanish beneath waves. Columns topple. Prayer chants drowned by rising waters. The structure's orientation aligns with cardinal points. Some areas suggest knowledge of urban planning, sewage systems, gridded streets, water reservoirs. But perhaps most remarkable is its age. If proven authentic, the site predates Harappan civilization by thousands of years. What kind of society builds cities to outlast time, then watches the ocean erase them? We float above the ruins now, watching their shapes flicker beneath green currents. Visibility is poor. Nature guards its secrets here. But sonar tells a different story, one of intention, geometry, and silence. Sometimes the past doesn't sink, it waits. Currents move swiftly here, wrapping the rocks like ribbons of memory. Below the sea, near Yonaguni Island, a shadowed shape spreads across the seabed, an immense stone structure marked by flat plains, terraces, and angular steps that seem almost too clean for chance. Some claim it's a geological anomaly, a byproduct of tectonic uplift and fracturing limestone. But others, divers, archaeologists, dreamers, see something more. The formation measures over 150 meters in length and rises in stepped layers. Each level resembles a giant altar. Horizontal platforms are flanked by edges so sharp they resemble masonry. Stairways descend into what feels like ceremonial space, each ledge perfectly spaced, as if made for human legs. A path leads to what resembles a stage, an open square surrounded by upright stones. Could nature have carved something this deliberate? We drift closer. The water presses gently as if urging caution. Coral clings to every edge, blurring its purpose. But the core structure remains intact, massive and silent. There are no tool marks, no inscriptions, just precision and scale. On Yonaguni itself, stories tell of a land once swallowed by the sea. Tales of ancient kingdoms lost in storms, and gods who shaped islands like clay. If this was built, it had to predate the melting of the last ice age, placing it well before recorded Japanese civilization. That alone would alter Asia's timeline. And perhaps that's why the mystery persists. Science hesitates, unwilling to leap without proof. But underwater, proof fades with time. We follow a narrow trench cut perfectly into the stone. Its walls are smooth, its corners squared. No animals nest here. No signs of chaos or collapse. Just symmetry and silence. Whether monument or mistake. Yonaguni invites us to look again at the ocean, at time, and at our own definitions of civilization. We arrive just before sunrise. The wind moves gently through the dry grasses of Shanlurfa, rustling over a mound that once seemed like nothing more than a hill. But beneath this slope, carefully blanketed by time, rests Göbekli Tepe, a prehistoric temple complex that rewrote archaeology's timeline. Circular enclosures lie exposed to the morning light. Within them, massive T-shaped pillars, some rising over 5 meters, stand embedded in limestone floors. Each stone is carved with creatures, foxes with curved backs, scorpions frozen mid-sting, vultures with spread wings. No writing accompanies them, only symbols, raw and deliberate. These stones were set by hands that lived 11,000 years ago at the dawn of agriculture. Yet the builders were not farmers. They were hunter-gatherers, thought by previous models to lack permanence, let alone the architectural ambition to raise megaliths. Each circle has a center. 2 taller pillars face one another, as if in dialogue. Around them, supporting stones form an outer ring. The layout is careful, symmetrical, ritualistic. Excavators found no signs of domestic life, no hearths, no homes. This wasn't a village. It was something else. A sanctuary, a seasonal gathering place, a map of the cosmos. Then a deeper mystery. The entire site was deliberately buried around 8000 BCE. Earth was hauled in, layer by layer, to hide it. Not destroyed, preserved. As we trace the edge of one enclosure, we pause at a carving of a headless human figure. Its presence unsettles. Was it myth, memory, a warning? Some suggest Gobekli Tepe reflects not only early religion, but early engineering. Its scale hints at communal effort, knowledge of leverage, balance, astronomy. Without wheels, without beasts of burden, what kind of society chooses to build something so monumental only to hide it under soil? In its silence, Gobekli Tepe whispers that we've barely begun to remember who we were. Beneath the gray-blue waves of the North Sea lies a ghost of a continent, a land once rich with rivers and marshes, herds of red deer, and human footpaths has become a seabed that few have ever imagined. This is Doggerland, the lost realm that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. We begin our journey with a fishing trawler off the coast of Norfolk. The nets pull up more than cod. Sometimes there are bones of mammoth, reindeer, or even human remains. Occasionally, flint tools emerge, still sharp after 8,000 years. They come from a world beneath us, preserved in silence. During the last ice age, the sea was lower, and a vast plain stretched from Yorkshire to Denmark. It was a mosaic of forests, lakes, and estuaries. Here, Mesolithic communities hunted, gathered, and perhaps even told stories under the stars. They moved with the seasons, mapping the rivers that now lie buried under salt water. The drowning of Doggerland was not sudden. As the glaciers melted, the sea crept in year by year, century by century. What began as a distant shimmer on the horizon became an encroaching force. We imagine a family standing on a bluff, watching the tide take what was once a path, a field, a home. Geologists have mapped this drowned world with seismic scans. Underwater ridges mirror ancient rivers. Peat deposits still cradle pollen from extinct plants. These are whispers of a land not forgotten, but hidden. Doggerland challenges how we understand loss. It wasn't a cataclysm. It was erosion over generations. Too slow for memory, yet too vast to ignore. What else have we lost? Not through fire or war, but through time's steady breath. When we look across the North Sea, we're not just seeing water, we're seeing what used to be. Along the plains of Manitoba, a wind brushes over gently rolling fields. To the untrained eye, it seems like ordinary farmland. But this land was once the bed of something vast, Lake Agassiz, a freshwater colossus that dominated the post-glacial landscape nearly 13,000 years ago. At its peak, Lake Agassiz held more water than all the modern Great Lakes combined. Fed by the retreating Laurentide ice sheet, it stretched from what's now Saskatchewan to the edges of Minnesota. It was not just a lake, it was a temporary ocean suspended on land. We walk the ancient shorelines still etched into the hills. These beaches now sit far from water, raised high by time and Earth's shifting crust. The remnants of driftwood, sandbars, and flattened rocks are quiet storytellers, revealing a cycle of expansion and sudden release. What makes Lake Agassiz extraordinary isn't just its size, but its collapse. As glacial dams weakened, The lake discharged into the Arctic, the North Atlantic, and at one point, the Mississippi Basin. The floods were colossal, reshaping terrain, deepening river valleys, and possibly sending shockwaves into the global climate system. Some scientists believe one of these massive outflows cooled the planet rapidly, triggering the Younger Dryas, a mysterious 1,200-year return to glacial conditions. If true, a single burst of water may have changed migration, crop growth, and the very rhythm of human development across continents. Along submerged valleys and now buried deltas, it's not impossible that settlements once flourished, small groups following herds, crafting shelters from bone and hide, then washed away without a trace. Their stories, if ever told, were taken with the current. What remains now is silence, a dry lakebed, a long forgotten tide. But underneath, we find the gravity of memory, the weight of what water can both give and take. Beneath the shifting tides of Japan's southern coast, shadows flicker along the seafloor. Here, in the waters near Yonaguni Island, a massive stone structure lies hidden beneath the waves, silent, geometric, and carved with precision that has puzzled divers and scholars alike. The monument was discovered in the 1980s by a local diver exploring the seabed. What he found appeared otherworldly. Staircases that led nowhere, terraces shaped like stepped ziggurats, and right angles etched into the bedrock as though measured by ancient tools. It looked like a forgotten city, swallowed by the sea. Some argue that it's a natural formation, tectonic shifts and ocean erosion crafting what our eyes misread as human design. Others see too much order, platforms too symmetrical, lines too clean. If crafted by hands, then it was built over 10,000 years ago, before the end of the last ice age, when sea levels were drastically lower. We drift along its edge, studying the vertical faces that plunge into the depths. The coral that grows there doesn't obscure the underlying shape. It seems to protect it. Stone cutouts resemble ceremonial steps. Flat plazas hint at gathering places. There's even what some call a megalithic face, a weathered carving that watches the current, eroded but eerily human. Could this have been part of a coastal society, thriving on a sunken shelf before the oceans surged? Were they architects of stone, or simply witnesses to geological coincidence? We may never know, but the monument reminds us of how fragile memory can be beneath the weight of time and tide. Lost beneath just 25 meters of water, it asks us to consider how many other chapters of humanity lie drowned and undisturbed, waiting for someone to descend, to see not just rock, but story. From above, the Sahara unfolds like a sea of silence, waves of sand cresting in golden ridges. But nestled deep within its barren heart lies a formation unlike anything else on Earth. A colossal eye carved into the desert, its concentric rings spiraling outward as if staring into the cosmos. This is the Rishat structure. From ground level, it's hard to grasp its true scale. The terrain feels uneven, rocky, unremarkable. But once viewed from space, the terrain reveals itself circular, layered, symmetrical, a pattern embedded in the Earth itself. Geologists classify it as a deeply eroded dome, shaped by wind and water over eons. They point to uplifted sedimentary rock, natural faults, and chemical weathering. But the symmetry is uncanny, a perfect bullseye, and its dimensions align curiously with ancient descriptions of Atlantis. 3 concentric rings of land and water, vast enough to house a mighty civilization. Could this have once been a verdant basin, teeming with life, before desert sands encroached? Was it ever inhabited, perhaps when the Sahara was still green, lush with lakes and rivers during the African humid period? Archaeological evidence is scarce, yet stone tools, pottery fragments, and burial sites in nearby regions suggest human presence going back tens of thousands of years. Not advanced cities, but scattered signs, like the whisper of memory. We follow the curvature, imagining colossal walls rising where now only stone remains. If it wasn't Atlantis, could it have inspired its story? A tale passed down through floods, migrations, and fading tongues? Whether natural wonder or ancient blueprint, the Eye of the Sahara remains a mystery etched into the Earth's skin. A spiral too large to see without stepping back, too perfect to fully dismiss. The Amazon seems endless, a labyrinth of green, thick with vines and mist, where the canopy forms a living ceiling that blocks the sun. For centuries, this jungle was thought to be nature's fortress, untouched, impenetrable, and wild. But as we gaze deeper with the eyes of modern satellites, a different picture emerges. Using LiDAR, light detection, and ranging, scientists now peel back the jungle's layers, revealing what no human eye could see from the ground. Grids of roads, circular earthworks, canal systems, and geometric mounds spread across hundreds of kilometers. These weren't random clearings or tribal camps. They were cities, planned, constructed, connected. Beneath the foliage of southern Amazonia, entire civilizations once flourished. Some built roads that stretched for dozens of miles, aligned with cardinal directions. Others constructed platforms and ceremonial centers with precise symmetry. At their height, these societies may have supported tens of thousands, cultivating the land with bioengineered soil now known as terra preta, dark earth rich in carbon and nutrients. What caused these cities to vanish remains uncertain. Climate shifts, European disease after first contact, or the jungle simply reclaiming its own. Over time, trees grew over temples, roots twisted through walls, silence buried knowledge, and yet the forest never truly erased them. It only concealed. The data now speaks with maps of light, illuminating what had been hidden for centuries. In doing so, it forces us to revise what we thought we knew. The Amazon wasn't an untouched garden. It was, in places, a canvas of design. We begin to wonder, how many more stories lie beneath the leaves? If the jungle can cloak entire cities, what might the deserts, oceans, or ice still be hiding? The forest hums with life, but also with memory, a memory waiting to be uncovered, beam by beam, from the shadows of the green. Beneath the soft plains of Cappadocia, far below the surface, there is a city. It does not rise with towers or glitter with stone palaces. Instead, it descends, layer after layer, hallway after hallway, into the belly of the earth. Derinkuyu, they call it, the deep well. Carved into the volcanic tuff thousands of years ago, this underground metropolis could shelter over 20,000 people. It wasn't a simple shelter. It was a fully functional city, complete with stables, kitchens, churches, communal rooms, wine presses, and miles of tunnels connecting to other hidden cities nearby. Descending through its narrow shafts, we find entire levels engineered with complex systems. Air shafts bring in fresh air from the surface. Massive stone doors, wheel-shaped and perfectly fitted, could seal corridors in seconds. Wells reached freshwater sources deep underground, some sealed from above, in case enemies poisoned the surface. But what threat drove people so far below? Some say it was invaders, raiders sweeping across Anatolia. Others whisper of environmental catastrophe or celestial events. But the truth is, Derinkuyu was not just reactionary. Its design reveals forethought, engineering, and a kind of collective discipline rarely seen. Each chamber was deliberate, each staircase carved for purpose. In a place where sunlight could never reach, they built a society that worked, lived, worshipped, and endured. Even today, the lowest levels haven't been fully explored. Caves may run deeper than we know. As we trace our hands along its walls, the cool air and silence press in. These aren't the ruins of a forgotten people. They are the echoes of a civilization that chose to vanish underground and somehow still speaks. Derinkuyu reminds us that progress is not always above ground. Sometimes, the most sophisticated designs are buried in places shaped more by necessity than pride. Far to the south, beyond the reach of ordinary memory, lies a land that time has entombed. Antarctica, vast, white, silent. On the surface, it appears lifeless, a realm sculpted by wind and frost. But beneath this icy silence, questions stir. Using ground-penetrating radar, satellites have begun to see through the miles-thick glacial blanket. What they've found isn't merely rock or water, but shapes, patterns that suggest intention, long corridors with right angles, hexagonal zones too symmetrical to be chance, layered anomalies that pulse faintly in thermal imaging, like breath beneath a frozen lung. Glaciologists explain many of these as subglacial lakes or pressure ridges. They remind us of how ice can mimic architecture, how nature folds and refolds terrain. But even some within the scientific community admit there are patterns here that do not align with glacial mechanics alone. The Gambortsev Mountains, buried completely beneath the ice, rise like a forgotten spine of an ancient land. In the Princess Elizabeth region, satellites picked up a grid of magnetic anomalies, each spaced evenly, stretching for miles. Structures or stones we cannot yet say. The ice is too thick, the tools too limited. Could there have been something here before the freeze? A society advanced enough to prepare for the coming cold? Or are these signs of a civilization not yet discovered, whose rise and fall predated even the memory of a continent's drifting? What unsettles us is not just the shapes, it's the silence. No ruins, no bones, no artifacts, just the echo of geometry in the deep cold, waiting. Perhaps what lies beneath Antarctica isn't evidence. It's a question we're not ready to answer. And yet, we keep looking. Because the ice, no matter how ancient, cannot hold its secrets forever. Across the vastness of the Indian Ocean and the silent blue depths of the Pacific, whispers rise from the seafloor. Ancient stories speak of a land swallowed whole, Lemuria to some, Mu to others. It was said to be a continent, home to civilizations of light and wisdom, now gone without a trace. But is it only myth, or are there echoes beneath the waves? Geologists argue the Earth's crust doesn't allow for entire continents to vanish. Plate tectonics doesn't erase, it reshapes. Yet the ocean hides many secrets. Off the coast of India, the submerged city of Dwarka challenges timelines. In the Pacific, the Yonaguni Monument, with its clean angles and sharp ledges, stirs debate. Is it a natural formation or the remnant of something crafted? Then there are the fossil records. Lemur species found in Madagascar and India, but nowhere in between. How did they cross? Before plate drift became accepted, the land bridge theory tried to fill that gap and gave birth to the idea of Lemuria. Later dismissed by science, the name endured, and perhaps so did the question. Across Polynesia, legends of sunken kingdoms abound. Oral traditions carry the shape of memories, floods, gods descending from the sky, and lands that once connected islands now parted by vast distances. These stories may not offer proof, but they refuse to fade. The Indian Ridge, the Mascarene Plateau, the sunken land around Zealandia, these are real. Large underwater structures that hint at ancient topographies, reshaped by time and tectonics. Not all are ruins, but many seem out of place. We may never walk Lemuria's shores, but we can listen to the silence where it once might have stood. Beneath miles of water, the earth may still remember where its forgotten continent fell. As we move across continents and time periods, a strange pattern begins to surface, one that suggests memory may stretch farther than we believe. Stone pyramids rise not just in Egypt, but in Central America. Stories of a deluge appear in Sumerian clay and in Andean oral tradition. Serpents wind their way through temples in Angkor Wat, Teotihuacan, and the Australian Dreamtime. These similarities reach across the oceans, as if civilizations long separated by land and language once drank from the same well of meaning. Mainstream archaeology offers a simple answer: convergent evolution. Given similar needs like food storage, religious ceremony, or seasonal tracking, cultures may independently arrive at similar designs. But that explanation grows fragile when we consider the precision of certain alignments. The pyramids of Giza, the temples of Angkor, and even Stonehenge reflect not only aesthetic brilliance, but a command of celestial mechanics. These were societies that understood solstices, lunar cycles, and even precession long before the modern calendar emerged. In myth, these people often claim they were taught by sky gods, sages, or visitors who came from the stars. In Egypt, it was Thoth. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl. In Sumer, Enki. Beings who did not rule through force, but through knowledge, bestowing language, astronomy, and architecture. We cannot prove these beings existed, but the patterns their stories leave behind continue to echo. There is also the mystery of flood myths. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the tales of Manu and Nu'u, cultures around the world describe a moment when water reset the earth. While rising sea levels after the Ice Age could explain some of this, the consistency in narrative arc, warnings, chosen survivors, sacred vessels, feels less like coincidence and more like collective recall. As we sift through stone and symbol, we must ask, did ancient societies share a forgotten common source? Or are we witnessing the deep structure of the human mind, wired to build, to revere the sky, and to remember loss through myth? Either way, the resonance remains. In architecture, in story, and in the quiet alignment of shadows cast by the sun. Beneath layers of silt and centuries of erosion, some discoveries flicker with uncomfortable possibility. A clay pot with a copper rod and asphalt stopper, unearthed near Baghdad, may have once generated low-voltage electricity. A bronze machine, found in the wreckage of a Greek ship, contains gears with teeth so finely cut they wouldn't appear again for over 1,000 years. These are not myths or fabrications. They are catalogued, measured, and real. And yet, their presence unsettles. The Baghdad Battery, the Antikythera mechanism, polished lenses in Egyptian tombs, drilled holes in granite with spiral grooves, suggesting high-speed rotation. These objects don't rewrite history, but they whisper around its margins. They suggest that the past may have experimented with science, optics, and energy in ways we no longer remember. Not in every village or temple, but in places where knowledge concentrated like fire in dry grass. Some archaeologists argue these are misunderstood. The battery might be a simple storage jar, the gears a one-time marvel, but this explanation rests on an assumption that ancient people were curious but crude. That precision was beyond them. That absence of widespread replication equals impossibility. But history isn't always additive. Knowledge can vanish. Fires go out. The loss of a single artisan, a library, a language, can unmake 1,000 years of progress. Modern engineers, when examining the Antikythera mechanism, describe it as a mechanical computer, predicting eclipses and planetary motion. Its gear ratios reflect not guesswork, but celestial understanding. The implication isn't just that someone built it. It's that someone thought in systems, cycles, and prediction. Thought like we do, but earlier. We're left with two choices. See these as anomalies, sparks in a dark forest, or accept the possibility that beneath the visible timeline runs a deeper layer, one of forgotten complexity, Maybe not spaceships or lasers, but tools of understanding built by minds as sharp as ours. And if such minds once turned stone and copper into machines, what else did they dream before time swallowed their blueprints? Across every continent, pieces remain, etched into basalt, buried beneath jungle canopies, or sunk under waves whose rhythm never ceases. What began as scattered clues has become a mosaic of deeper questions, not just what they built or how, but why they vanished. If our planet once held a civilization with extraordinary reach, its absence now teaches as much as its trace. We've seen how timelines bend, how oral stories outlive stone, how myth can encode fact, not in precision, but in feeling. The Great Flood may not be metaphor. The wandering gods may reflect sky watchers who charted stars with mirrors and memory. Perhaps they did not see themselves as advanced, but simply as part of the whole: sky, stone, soil, and soul. They built not to dominate nature, but to resonate with it. Modern minds often seek sharp edges, proof, carbon dating, equations. But the earth records meaning in softer tones: pollen grains under obsidian, magnetism in clay shards, the curvature of tunnels bored into living mountains. These are not hallucinations, they're invitations. Maybe the legacy of such a society was not to endure in structures, but in symbols: spirals carved into stone, alignments that still mark the solstice. A lens ground to clarity not just in glass, but in philosophy. The idea that to observe the universe was to know one's self. As we stand at the edge of knowledge, one truth returns again and again: erasure is natural. Civilizations rise, shimmer, and fade. What we leave behind is not always what we intend. Sometimes it is the questions we awaken that persist. So we close this journey not with finality, but with an opening, an aperture of thought. What if the ruins are not just memory, but blueprint? What if the past isn't warning us, but calling us, not to remember, but to rebuild differently? The silence that follows discovery is often louder than the evidence itself. When we uncover a tool without a name, a glyph without a known language, or a structure too precise for the materials around it, the mind doesn't rest, it wanders. In that space between certainty and mystery, something deeper begins to echo. Not just facts, but meanings. Not just who were they, but what are we missing? Perhaps the greatest imprint of an ancient, advanced civilization is not technological, but psychological, like a phantom limb in the collective unconscious. It reminds us of something once vital, something now missing: a sense of deep time, a reverence for cycles, an awareness that knowledge is not always linear and progress is not always upward. Across cultures, stories of a golden age or a fall from knowledge persist. In Hindu cosmology, the yugas rotate through time, moving from enlightenment to decay. In Greek myth, Prometheus gave fire, and humanity paid for stolen divinity. The Mayans, the Egyptians, the Hopi, the Dogon all carry myths not of discovering wisdom, but of losing it. These myths are not warnings alone, they're reflections of a truth we resist. We forget. Memory is fragile, even for civilizations. Languages die, libraries burn, symbols erode, and yet the desire to be remembered endures. Perhaps this is why ancient builders carved into stone instead of bark, why they aligned their monuments with stars that would outlive them, why some symbols, spirals, tridents, circles, appear across oceans without contact. They were not just preserving knowledge, they were embedding resonance. It's not hard to imagine that they too worried about being misunderstood by those who would come after. Maybe they knew the earth would shift, the seas would rise, the skies would change. So they encrypted their knowledge, not in code, but in feeling, in harmony, in design, in patterns that would still stir wonder, even if the message was lost. This feeling of being downstream from something vast and unknowable can trigger both fear and humility. It can make us question our place in history, our confidence in our age. Are we the pinnacle, or simply another curve in a greater cycle? Psychologists have long understood the power of myth to organize the psyche. Carl Jung wrote of archetypes, patterns of memory buried so deep they shape our thoughts without words. The lost civilization is one such archetype. It represents our longing for wholeness, for a time when we were wise and in harmony with nature. Whether real or symbolic, it offers us something modern life often withholds: rootedness. To believe that we are not the first nor the greatest is not defeat. It is perspective. It reminds us that meaning doesn't come from how far we've come, but how deeply we connect. The ancients may have spoken in symbols, we speak in data, but both long for the same thing: understanding. So when we kneel before ruins or gaze into star-mapped ceilings of forgotten chambers, we're not just looking back. We're asking something timeless. Will we be remembered? And if so, for what? Maybe their silence is not absence, but invitation, not mystery, but mercy, a space left open for us to imagine better. Night falls differently when you stand where the ancients stood. At high desert altitudes, the sky is no longer a ceiling, but an ocean. Stars burn with a clarity that cities cannot imagine. In such places, ancient builders raised their monuments not to defy gravity, but to align with eternity. They tracked equinoxes, eclipses, the slow drift of the heavens known as precession, a cycle of 25,800 years that our modern calendars only rediscovered with precision instruments. From Nabta Playa's stone circles to the pyramids at Giza, from Chaco Canyon's kivas to Angkor Wat's alignments, there is a quiet message. They were not guessing. They were measuring, calibrating, remembering. The sky was not just backdrop, it was archive. Consider the Dogon of Mali, whose oral traditions speak of the invisible star Sirius long before telescopes confirmed it. Scholars debate the source, contact, coincidence, or an extraordinary intuitive system. But the fact remains sky knowledge was held as sacred, guarded by memory instead of machines. If such knowledge could survive orally for centuries, what might have been held in vanished libraries or carved into lost temples? When we speak of advanced civilizations, we often picture metal, engines, or electricity. But perhaps their advancement was of a subtler kind, a capacity to hold cosmic cycles in cultural consciousness, not just to predict an eclipse, but to understand it as part of a living pattern, not just to know where the stars are, but when and why they shift. Archaeologists sometimes dismiss these alignments as ritualistic, but ritual in ancient worlds was not separate from science. It was science performed as reverence. Each temple axis, each solstice window was a formula rendered in stone and shadow, a collective act of remembering the sky. We look upward today through satellites and digital sky surveys. We produce more data in a night than an ancient priesthood could in a century, yet our knowledge feels thinner, less rooted. We rarely build to last. We rarely encode meaning in stone. We no longer think in processional cycles, but in fiscal quarters and election seasons. And so we stand here, at the edge of what they knew, aware that time erodes memory but also recycles it. Stars that rose over forgotten cities now rise over ours. The same constellations, slightly shifted, keep their vigil. Perhaps this was their gift, hidden in myth and monument, to show that Earth's story is not local, that our rise and fall are woven into a celestial rhythm much older than any empire, to see ourselves not as isolated, but as a pattern unfolding within a larger dance. If so, the legacy of these vanished sky watchers is not lost. It's above us, every night, if we learn again how to read it. Some absences are louder than presence. Across deserts and jungles, under oceans and ice, we find fragments, stones arranged in circles, walls etched with forgotten symbols, lines too straight to be natural. And in the silence that surrounds them, we project meaning. Not just because we are curious, but because something deep within us remembers. The shape of wisdom. It is not proof we hunger for. It is resonance. Why do we keep returning to these sites in documentaries, in books, in dreams? Why do the questions never quite close? Perhaps because we sense that these civilizations did not just vanish, they transcended, or fell, yes, but in a way that left behind the shape of something more complete than we are now, not technologically, but spiritually, culturally, in their relationship with time, nature, and death. A ruin is a wound in time, but also a mirror. We look at Göbekli Tepe's pillars, older than agriculture, and feel a strange humility. We gaze at submerged temples off the coast of India and feel something tug, an ache not for dominance, but for belonging, not for answers, but for continuity, for the reassurance that what we are today is not the peak, but a recurrence. And this may be the final paradox. These ancient societies, whether real or romanticized, offer us a kind of psychological scaffolding. They give shape to a lost possibility. They whisper, "You are not alone in time. You are not the first to awaken." In the myths of golden ages, Atlantis, Lemuria, the Zep Tepi of Egypt, there is a longing that goes beyond fantasy, a wish that our ancestors were more than primitive, more than brutal, more than survival machines, a hope that they chose stillness, that they cultivated harmony over conquest, that they once knew what we've forgotten. And maybe they did. Or maybe we invented them that way because it is we who long for meaning now. But if imagination carries memory, then imagining them is also a kind of remembering. Each story we tell, each ruin we honor, each alignment we decode, it becomes an act of reconstruction, not just of the past, but of ourselves. So let us end not with a conclusion, but a gesture. Let us leave open the door between eras. Let the possibility linger, like mist over standing stones, like a breeze through shattered pillars. Let the silence of the ancients be not emptiness, but invitation. Not all monuments are built in stone. Some are carved in the human psyche, in the ache to remember what we were and might be again.